Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Alright, cool. Nice to meet you. You can just call me Ram. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So you wanted to so we're gonna go over portrait drawing. You just wanted to see the process start to finish. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So that's kind of a lot to cover in an hour, but I'm gonna try my best here. And then so basically what I've done is I've prepared two little videos here. One is a male and one is a female, and then the most of the focus will be on the female one because I guess I should ask what your goal is. Like, what kind of is there anything specific you're trying to accomplish? Like, your end goal in terms of what you want to draw. You want to do people, right? Do portraits, but is there anything specific like you want to do?
Well, yeah, I want to be able to draw portraits like you were doing yesterday. Like, it had great detail. I thought at first, man, that's got to be a picture. But then I saw you were like filling it in. It's like, I need to do that.
Okay.
And then I saw your layers. I was like, yeah, it's going to take a while.
Okay, sounds good. I'll just go over. I guess I have two videos prepared. We'll go over those. Should take about 30 to 40 minutes, and then feel free to stop me at any point with questions, and then we'll just try to talk about it. So the number one thing you want to do when you start is you need to have a good sketch, right? Because if you don't have a good sketch, you're never gonna everything's gonna be off. No matter how good you are at coloring, things just aren't gonna work. So
Yeah.
can you see the video that I'm showing right now?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so there's two ways I like to go about. There's two ways that I know of, or that are most common to me in terms of how you want to go about the sketch. So we're doing humans here. So number one. So there's two. One method is treating the human like it's a doll and just like building it out of shapes, like we're doing here. So basically, what we do is and people talk about like, oh, I can only draw stick figures. That's fine. This is a stick figure right here. Okay, right. So we're building a stick figure. We're filling out the shapes. Just think of him like as like cylinders, circles, whatever you needed to call it, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
And you're just building a human out of that. Talk about like it's building a doll because I think of it like toys I used to have when I was a kid. You can see all the ball joints and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the IKEA dolls. Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much what you're doing here. And so that's part of you kind of just sketch out what you need to do there, basic body features. The reason. One great thing about this method would be that you have better control over what kind of pose you have. Like you can really go with any pose you want as long as you have a good understanding of human anatomy and you can get the proportions right. Which brings me to the reason that a lot of artists, like when I'm doing a very specific face sketch of like a real celebrity or something, I won't use this method just because it is less accurate. Like you're never gonna get a one-to-one, like a perfect representation of a human this way. But if you're trying to build like your own person from scratch, like we're doing here, we're just kind of just a generic looking old guy, Asian old guy. So knowing that and not really having any strict requirements, we can definitely use this method and whatever pose we want, whatever face we want, and that really helps us out in terms of creativity. So let me just speed up the rest of this. This part isn't terribly important. And then yeah, and as far as human proportions, there's guides on that like everywhere online. I could go over all of them, but we'd be here all day, so I'm just gonna keep letting this go through, and then once we complete that, I'll show you the other method that I wanted to talk about, and then we can go over some color as well.
So are you using a mouse and a mouse pad, or are you using?
I'm using I'm using a tablet. So I have a drawing tablet.
Oh, okay.
Right, and I think this can be done with a mouse. It's just incredibly difficult, and it doesn't.
Challenge.
I don't know if that's a challenge I'd want to take on. It's incredible. It would take probably at least 3 to 4 times as long, and it would just have a more manufactured quality, right? So
yeah,
it wouldn't look as natural in terms of
strokes.
Yeah, exactly. And it would just take so much longer because you can't get the difference in like stroke length, and brush thickness, so it'll look a little bit off. Alright, so now this is the important part. We're doing the face here. Normally you would want to draw lines, like a line down the middle of the face, a line around like horizontally to find out what the eyes are. Because I've been drawing for so long in my life, I kind of just eyeballed it, right? And it's a bad practice, but once you get enough practice, it really isn't. It's fine, right? Like but you should do the lines especially if you're first starting out. It's definitely helpful. But since I've drawn so many people, this one is not terribly difficult.
How many layers is this particular image on?
This one right now is only 2 layers. We have 1 layer for all the lines, including the hair and the skeleton, and the to close. That's all in one layer, and this face is on a separate layer because if I mess up like an eye, if I make an eye too small, I don't want it to clip into the hair when I resize it, so I put that on a separate layer. You can definitely go with more layers here. It's just because I'm not terribly concerned about the overall quality of it, because the sketch is not that important. So one thing that's important here is, oh fuck, sorry, I'm on stream right now and I want to make sure that I didn't and I just lost my video. Sorry, give me a second. So anyway, what we do here is I'm flipping the image, and you'll see me do that once in a while because what that does is it checks for asymmetry. Because when you're drawing something, you look at it at a specific direction for a long time, and you get your brain gets used to it. So you might think to yourself like, yeah, this is fine, and everything looks good, but that's because you've been looking at it for so long at that angle. Flipping it really gives you a new perspective, and then you can really, it's like your brain is viewing it as a different picture entirely, so you can really get a better idea of what's happening out of that.
Yeah, I was doing that yesterday. I was trying to make making a picture and making an image, and it was kind of I wasn't getting mad. I was getting, a bit tilted because I couldn't get the cheekbones to match the other cheekbones. I was like, whatever, I'll just freehand it.
Yeah, no, it's super easy to let that let it get away from you. So I think sometimes it helps just to literally walk away from the computer and come back. So as far as the face, there's a lot of different rules that go into it, but and I don't even know most of them, honestly. A lot of what I do is just based off of a lot of intuition and experience. So you can always find, and there's so many rules. You can always find a little bit more of those online, but stuff like your eyes should be one eye width apart from each other, things like that. There's just a whole list of them, and a lot of that just comes with experience as well. But we're not here to talk about sketching people all day, right? So here I'm just adding a little bit of shading because the way I do a sketch really helps me to do a shading beforehand, because it's like you're getting familiar with the picture before you color it. And then when you color it, you're like, okay, I know where the shade's going because one, it's on my picture, and two, I've already drawn this before. So basically, you're just it's like getting to know your art before you really dive deep into it. So this is the final sketch, and this is using the first method we talked about, where you're drawing shapes to get a human face and human features. So another one I want to talk about. So then I'm gonna go over the next video, and I'm gonna send you a reference real quick, just so you have an idea of what. Send you a couple references real quick, just so you can look along as I'm doing it. Let me find them real quick.
All right.
References. Okay. So here's the first one we want to look at. Oh, it's sending right now. Did that actually send? Okay, it did send. And then there's another one too. These two as well. So the second method I want to talk about is where you use a grid, and I know you don't use Photoshop, right? You use Inkscape, you said.
Yep.
So I'm not familiar with that software, but they should all be pretty much the same. So here I have kind of I've kind of started something out here. It's not. Okay, is this playing? Okay, so here you can see I have grid lines on here, and this is a 5x5 grid to start with. And if you look at the picture that I sent you, the first one, you can look at the girl's face. Basically what we've done here is we've made an image that has the same proportions as that reference photo I showed you. Yep. So if this image I sent you is 600 by 1000, this one would be double that. So maybe, but it'd have to have the same proportions, like 1200 by 2000. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right.
So that way if you use a grid, the grid will show up on your reference as well as your paper. So it's almost like filling in blanks or connecting dots, right? So for example, in here we can see the corner of the eye is right at the corner of this grid line. So the top of the eye is at the corner of this grid line, so we know, yeah, the eye should go here. And here's me testing my pens, don't mind me. So what happens there is we just go through, try to get a better idea with a decent idea of spacing between the lines and the grid lines. We just keep going at it. Just draw what you see. This method is very good if you're trying to make a specific person. This is a Korean celebrity, so and she has a lot of fans, right? So if I don't do it right, people are gonna yell at me. They're gonna be like, hey, that doesn't look like her. You didn't do a good job, right? So I gotta make sure that we do a good job here. So if I'm trying to go for accuracy over everything, I'll use this grid method because it's if you do it right, it's gonna be a 1-to-1. It's gonna be very close to a 1-to-1 replica, like very like more accurate than you could get in other methods. I'm gonna slow this down a little bit. So I'm basically just going at this with the 5x5 grid, but but you can see I can do the hair here because the hair is not terribly precise. It doesn't need to be like absolutely perfect as long as the general shape is correct. But once we get closer into the features of the face here, so like the nose, the lips, you can see me start to slow down because I'm not we're kind of getting further away from the line. So here, and then it becomes a little bit less familiar. So unless you're like a god in terms of like looking at like judging space with your eyes, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
So as we go along here, we'll increase the number of spaces here. So we have a 6x6, no, is it 7x7 grid now. Basically what we'll do is that gives us a new perspective, some new corners to work with, and that way we can check where the placement of our previous features were. So for example, if I thought if the eye was too small here, then I could stretch out the eye based off of the new information we've gained from using this 7x7 grid. And so basically that's kind of how it goes. And like you can see the eye was too small, so I stretched it out there. And this is pretty much how just the entire process. It's kind of tedious, but I think it's very effective. And so, like I said before, the reason we want to use this method is because it's a lot more accurate, and you don't really need a huge understanding of human anatomy to do it. I always joke and say a monkey could do this part. It'd be a pretty smart monkey, but the point is, like, it doesn't require a lot of training. If you just want to draw like that's a pretty girl, I want to draw her face exactly the way it is, exactly this pose, then this method is going to really help you out with that. The downside is if you're trying to do something different, like we said before, if you're trying to do a different pose, some different clothes, you're gonna have to improvise in other ways, and that's kind of what we do here. So I like this face. So we've used this face. We're doing some shading. We flip it a couple times to make sure it's correct. And this shading, like I said, is just to get more acquainted with what we're doing, make sure that we have an idea of where the paint is supposed to go when we eventually do that. So I'm just gonna speed up through this part because it's not as important. It's just a little bit detail work. So
when you go into color it, do you use exact copies of the original image, or do you just freehand it?
I'll show you. It's in the video, so I'll show you as we go on. There's a couple different ways we can do it.
All
right. So we have our face here. We have like a little bit of a bust here, which is not really in the picture. So if I want to draw a new outfit, which I'm going to do here, let's go skip through that. There's like a couple different outfits I went with here. So at this point, I'm like, I want to do a different outfit as well. I want to have a couple different options. But I want it to still be accurate, and I still want it because I could freehand the clothes, but since the grid method allows me to get a little bit more detail, I want to make sure that everything is the same. Because if I do the grid method and get a super accurate face, and then I hand draw like the clothes, it won't. There will be a little bit of a mismatch just because the grid method gets you a much more accurate result. Yeah, and that gap will close as you improve your skill. But a lot of it is really mental, so you want to make sure that you do your best, right? So that was my idea here. So I made a little outfit here, and then I decided I wanted to do something else. So that second image I sent you is what we're doing here. And again, we're just using the grid to make this jacket design. And the way I look, I didn't feel like it was terribly important to get as ridiculously accurate because it's clothes, right? It's not. People are not going to be like, that fold is like 3 inches out, is 2 inches away from where it's supposed to be. No, it's not. It doesn't need to be as exact here. It can be if you really want it to, but I kind of just went with it. I think for the most part, it's still pretty accurate. You definitely get a level of detail that I personally wouldn't be able to do just thinking about it in my head. All these really minor folds and like the minor perforations in the jacket, like the ripples in the material.
Yeah.
So does this all make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So with the sketch done, and I did this in 2 parts here. With the sketch done, now we start laying down the color. So this is a very important part because if you don't layer your art correctly, it's going to be very difficult to get a neat look, and it's going to look a little bit kind of fudged and blurry. So the number one thing I do is I set the background to gray. I use 160, 160, 160 RGB. You can use whatever you want. The reason we do this is because a nice neutral color will help you will help your eyes adjust to the actual colors you're putting down better. You'll get a more accurate view of how your colors will look when you put them on other backgrounds. Because if you color it on white or black, if you color it on white, every color is gonna look dark in comparison to the
Yeah.
white, and then you put it on something else, and you're like, okay, that's way too bright. Conversely, with black, every color is gonna look way too bright. You're gonna use darker colors, and you're gonna put it on something else, and you're gonna be like, that's really dark. Okay, so I just use like a very neutral gray in between here. So there's the ways you can lay down your color. I use the pen tool, which allows me to set anchors, as you can kind of see here, and then make a very specific shape. I think most programs have this, some might not. So you asked previously, where do we pull our color sources from? A lot of times you will, like most times, more often than not, you're just gonna pull them straight from your reference, unless you're specifically trying to go for a different color. Like if I want to make her hair black, I wouldn't use that. I would just use like another set of black that I have used in my experience. Or you can pull it from another reference, like just find a picture of a girl with black hair, pull the color off of her hair, and just go from there. There's a couple of ways you can do it. This one I used a slightly different color just because the color in the reference I have, if you look at it, is a little bit washed out. It's kind of bluish almost. So I wasn't a huge fan of it. I just pulled a different skin color from a different base skin color from another drawing that I did, and that's where we went. So layering here is important because it helps define edges better. It's very hard for a human to separate those edges unless you're using a very sharp line, which again doesn't look realistic. So for example, here we have the face on one layer, right? The neck and shoulders are underneath the face, so because the face goes on top, right? And then this part of the hair is on top of everything because it's the highest point. It should cover everything. And then we have two separate hair layers underneath the face because they should go behind the face. And that's basically how we do it. And a lot of it you just have to be creative. Like here we separate this shirt into 3 different parts. We have the body, the top like fold over, and the sleeves. So that's 3 separate layers we have for the shirt there, just to make sure that things stay separate when we want them to. And that way we don't get smudged. And here I'm just checking to see how it looks on the background. All right.
That's cool.
Yeah, this part is not supposed to happen. My streaming thing messes up a lot, and it overlays pictures where there shouldn't be. All right, so, and then when you're so you want to start out with the color that's not the brightest but not the darkest. You basically just want to, like, for example, on this one, you'd basically just pick this like area of the cheek next to her mouth.
And use it to shade the face.
You'd use that. No, you'd want to set that as your base color because the way most artists are gonna do it is you're gonna start with like a neutral tone, like something that's in the middle of her color of the facial range of her, like the color range of her face. And then the way I do it is I'll put a dark layer. I'll put like a couple dark layers on and then a couple light layers. So if I start with something that's too light, I might end up with a face that's like overall just way too bright, and vice versa. Like the same reason we use gray as our background. So like you just want to eyeball it, pick up color that is kind of, that looks like it's kind of in the middle of, not the lightest part of her face and not the darkest either. So once we do that, we I am just putting a little bit of shading around just to get an idea of where things are supposed to go. There's a couple different ways to do this. I've seen a lot of artists, what they do is they'll just like put down like a little bit of color everywhere. Like they'll put a little bit, like just draw out the shape of where the eyes are supposed to be, draw where the nostrils are supposed to be, draw where the lips are supposed to be, and then like just put a couple patches of color. And then what they do is they continue to add along the whole face, just add detail until everything is done. I am more of like, I like to really just zero in on stuff. Like for example, I'm going 100% on these eyebrows right here because I want
perfect eyebrows.
Yeah, so once those are done, and then once that's done, and here you want to just like kind of, it's like hair, so you want to just like get a bunch of small strokes, kind of really get that like the effect of each hair in there, as well as the lighting effects overall. So I think brows are kind of difficult actually, but here you kind of just take some light, take some dark, light on the top, dark on the bottom, and then just kind of stroke it out like you have individual hairs here.
All right.
So, and this is all just, and there's a couple of specific tips based on what you're doing, like for if you're doing a girl with a lot of makeup or versus a guy who doesn't trim his brows and stuff, right? So we're gonna here we focus on the eyes. We draw the eyeliner in first just to get an idea of where the shape is supposed to, like what the shape of the eye is, where things are supposed to go. So we get that outline there, and then we fill it with white. Again, that's under the eyeliner, so layering it again here is really important.
All right.
Color these pupils, and they are perfect circles in real life most of the time. They probably don't want, but we'll blur them at the end so they're not perfectly sharp. some tear ducts here because people have those. It's one of the things that a lot of artists don't do. Throw some eyelashes in. Yeah, and it's just like something that you don't really you forget people have them until you look and you're like, oh, that's right. So
because depending on the picture what I have, I usually don't see the eyelashes, so I'm like, yeah, those aren't needed.
Right. And since I'm doing pretty girls here, the eyelashes are important, right? We gotta make them look nice. So we do some shading on the eye. You can do this in any order you want, really. Like if you want to go for the pupil first, that's fine as well. Basically, we're just adding shading here, making it look a little bit more realistic because the light, you know, the shadows and stuff on your eyes. So here we add the pupil, we add a little bit of darkness around it. In this case, this girl has pretty dark eyes. Like there's not a lot of light coming out of them, so we'll shade almost the whole thing. I added a little bit of extra light for dramatic effect here near the bottom because that's where you're gonna see most of it. Most of the top is gonna be covered by shadow, so you won't see that. And so at this point, you have an eye with like some light and some dark. Sorry, my thing is freaking out. Some light and some dark, and this still doesn't really look like a full eye. So this is one thing that people have asked me, like, how do you make the eyes look real? Like, how does it look like it actually has light coming out of it? And it's really the answer is so simple. It's actually hilarious. You literally take white, and then put 2 dots, and then just put some dots in the middle. And now these look like these look like real eyes, right? They actually look like they have light. That's weird. It's so funny because it's so simple, but it works, and people don't really get this, and then their eyes kind of look. So here we blur the pupil to make it look a little bit more realistic. But yeah, no, it's so simple, and people who don't do it, their eyes just look like they're possessed. So add a little bit of reflection in there. It's like magic, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just a little bit more shine in the eyes just to make it look kind of wet because your eyeballs are wet, right? So, and a lot of these are a lot of the stuff that we do here is very specific to like parts. Like if I want to go, I could literally make an hour-long video on how to paint an eye. So. So forgive me if I'm not really giving the most detail here. It's kind of tough to go through it all. So here we have the eye folds. This is important too. I think a lot of people don't realize this, especially if it's a really big thing in Asian culture. And I don't whether you have a double eyelid or not. And I talk about this with and I'm American, so I talk about this with a lot of people. If I bring this up with people who aren't so familiar with the concept, they're like, what do you mean eyelids? And like, so this line here is really important in terms of what your eye looks like and shaping it. So. Specifically, we want to make sure that in this case, it's a big deal because it's a girl, and if you don't do that, your eyes are going to look a lot smaller and puffier, so put a lot of detail around there. So here we just coloring that out, making sure that we get the right colors here. Making sure, just looking at the reference is very important, like just noticing where the light is, where the dark is. Some artists like to turn the skin into black and white because it helps you get the values right. Like if you're like, you know how dark you should go, you know how light you should go. Because a lot of times if you're just picking colors out of like a barrel, it's kind of tough to make sure that things stay consistent. You might get some more greenish or reddish tones, and then the face will kind of has potential to look blotchy or uneven. So when I was first starting out, I just drew the faces in black and white, and then I colored them after. Yeah. But at this point, I've done this a lot, so it's not as hard. I still can't say I do it perfectly, but it's not nearly as hard for me to pick out colors and skin colors and figure out what things are supposed to look like.
So what you're gonna go for is a balance in the 2 colors, but not the same colors?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So you want to balance out the you were talking about the black and the white, and dang it.
Yeah, so the reason we want to do black and white is because if you change it, like for example, if I change this picture to black, if I change the reference picture I sent you to black and white, you can see the exact like lightest color and the exact darkest color in black and white, and that's a lot easier for a human brain to process than like this is like a dark brown with like 30% red versus like this is a light yellow with like 70% white. That's a lot more difficult. If you just turn something to black and white, you just say that's light, this is dark, I know where it's supposed to go. And then in the end, you can, once you're done with that, you can throw some color on. I know that might be confusing, so maybe we can say that till the end. Maybe I can give you an example at the end. So here, I'm just putting down some areas. And like I said, I like to really focus on one area first, so I really went hard 100% on the eyes before moving on to other stuff. And now we're putting in the nose, putting down where the lips are supposed to go. And then kind of just adding a little bit of detail, so it's almost like a placeholder, like it's like a landmark, like you know where the nose is, you know where the lips are now. It's a lot easier to go about the rest of the face. So what this is now, we've added another layer to the face, and this is a layer for dark colors. So that way, if I mess up, I can just delete the layer and start over, instead of just painting it on the actual layer. So we made a new layer here for the darker colors, and we kind of, it's almost like, yeah, no, you're literally just like kind of, it doesn't have to be very precise, just like roughly put where the stuff, where like the dark areas are supposed to go here, and then as you progress through, you're gonna become more comfortable, because at first it's almost like it's just a blank, like a tan colored blob, right? It's very intimidating to work with. So just going through it slowly, piece by piece, just putting colors where they're supposed to be really helps out in terms of just breaking it down. Otherwise, it's really easy to get overwhelmed, especially with such a large task at hand.
So taking it piece by piece.
Basically taking, yeah, and it's almost like taking it like step by step. Like you can do 10% of the whole face, and then you just kind of add on to that as you move on. So basically now here, since I'm comfortable with where the lines, like I can see where the nose is, I can see where the cheekbones are, I know where the eyelids are, and where the nose bridge is. So here I'm kind of more comfortable with the face. I feel like I have an idea of where things are supposed to go.
So when you're coloring it in, do you still take it, use the grid reference?
I don't use the grid at this point because anything that I need is on my sketch. So that's why it's important to get a good sketch, because if I turn on my sketch layer, I've already done the shading, right? I've already done all the laying down of the line of the eyes, the nose, the lips. So I know where that stuff is. Because of the shading, I have it on my paper and I have an idea, like a mental idea. It's almost like muscle. It's like, I don't even want to say it's muscle memory. It's like you know where it is because you've messed with it before. So here I'm doing the lips, adding the dark, adding the light. This is how I normally do it. I usually do dark first and then light. So here's what that's what we're doing here. I think lips are a very complicated step, so it's kind of hard to explain. So we add a little bit of shadow. We add, making sure that the shininess of the lips are intact, and that's really what adds the lifelikeness to it, because it's almost like skin, except depending on like what lipstick or whatever a girl is wearing or whoever, it can get really shiny, and that's what makes it, and that's what gives it a texture and sets it apart from skin. So that's the important part here. As you can see, there's these white blotches, and if you don't have them, they kind of just look like pink skin, right? And that's not entirely what we want. We want something that'll set it apart and make it look a little bit more glamorous. So that's what we're doing here.
I did that yesterday. I just created like a shape of an outline of the lips itself, and I got lazy and drew a black line through it.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing about portraits is, to make a good portrait, you have to be basically like an insane person in terms of patience, because like why would you really have to just go through and do everything, like do all the stupid details that people don't want to do. And then once you get those lips, it's important to make sure that you smooth it out, the edges, so it transitions into the skin smoothly. That's a tough one too, otherwise it looks very like inhuman and tacked on. Alright, so here we're just adding more dark, we're just adding more and more dark, making sure, and eventually we'll just go darker and darker with it until we get to the darkest layer of the face, darkest values that are present in the face, and then I'll just say like, okay, that's probably good, and then we'll move on to something else. So moving at the right pace.
That makes sense.
Yep, so we can kind of speed through this a little bit. It's not terribly important. So yeah, we just literally just go darker, darker, darker. And then, yeah, so just keep, as we're doing this, we just keep looking at our reference, because, you know, if the reference gets away from you, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on there. Okay, if the reference gets away from you, you might accidentally move the nose into the wrong place, move it into the, okay. And so keeping the reference is important. So here I've kind of decided that I've done enough dark, so I'm going to start putting the light down. So these layers, so now you can see on the cheekbones, the chin, the forehead, especially the top of the very edge of the nose here, the point of the nose here is where light is going to hit. And you just notice that based off of looking at your reference. I think that's the easiest way to learn. Eventually you kind of just get it off of experience, but references are definitely the easiest way to get up to speed. It's better than I think it's better than slaving away looking at like art books and like drawing a bunch of stuff that looks really hard. Yeah, I don't enjoy. That's not my style. Some people like it, but I never had the patience for it. So now we're adding the darkest layer, and this is a shadow layer with set to multiply. What multiply does is, I don't know if you've ever used it in your programs, but I don't know, it might be called something different. What it does is it multiplies whatever colors you have, goes over the shading that you have, and just makes it darker. I don't know the exact science behind it, but it's very important to get that in the shadow layer, because it preserves whatever shading you've already done. And this is a lot to take in. I can give you some notes on this at the end, but
Alright.
yeah, so that we just get this is the absolute darkest levels of the face here, and we're just adding in whatever that, so like the shadows under the nose, the shadows around the chin, and like the forehead. So that's so at this point it's pretty much done in terms of face. You can see like it's starting to look like a real human, right?
Yeah.
Starting from where were we before? What was this before? This was literally nothing, right? This is just this potato-looking structure, and now we've gotten up to here. And it's just patience, like I said, just going from nothing, just slowly breaking it apart, going piece by piece, being patient along the whole thing. Because there's a lot of people I've worked with, like they'll get to this point or something, and they'll be like, "This looks like this point where like there's like some shading, but it still kind of looks like Play-Doh," and they'll just be like, "It looks so bad, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't think it does. I don't want to do it. Like it looks." I don't think I can make it look good. It's like, well, you literally just have to be patient. You literally just keep looking at your reference. You keep doing it. And so, the final touch on the face is I take a new layer and I just like it's very close to white here. And what we do is we add the shiny parts of the face because people's faces they have a little bit of a reflection, especially like if you've like been out for a long like sweating or something, or like you're wearing a lot of makeup. Your face is gonna get pretty shiny. So we want to capture that because this last layer I think really adds the detail to it and really brings it all together. So, and again, that's just looking at the reference. You can kind of get an idea of where that's supposed to go.
Yeah, I see it in the reference.
Yep. So, this is my favorite part, honestly, because after you do this, it's like, wow, this is really like a thing now, you know?
It's eerily lifelike. It's getting creepy.
Yeah, basically that's the point. And you're like, wow, it's like there's a real person staring at me, and I made this. It's like a really good feeling. So, so it's nice, right? And so we're pretty much done with the face here. We add some blush just to make it look a little, just because the blood is flowing there, it makes it look a little bit more lifelike. And here we go. And here we'll just repeat the same process with the no, there's an ear there. Okay. We repeat the same process with the neck, keeping track of where the shadows are supposed to fall based off. So this part of the neck, I don't have a reference for this, right? So I'm basically just I'm doing this. A lot of this is based off how you've looked at a lot of necks in your life, you've drawn a lot of things in your life. You kind of just go at it. You can look at some things. You can always Google stuff. Google is definitely your friend, especially when you're doing photorealism.
Yes.
You're Googling, like, just Google, like, in my search history looks so fucking, like, insane. I don't, like, people would think I'm a serial killer if I look at it. I'd be like, girls' hands, girls' necks, like, girls' lips. It's like, it's really bad. Anyway, so yeah, we look at, so just looking at, how we feel, like, things that we know about the way light works, the way human anatomy works, and that really helps. Knowing human anatomy is huge, as you can probably imagine. Just being able to, like, yeah, this muscle goes there, this muscle goes there. Luckily, that was my major in college. It's the only reason I know that.
Oh, really?
Yep. And so we like I said, we go from light, we go dark, 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 the darkest it goes, and then just adding the detail in. And then once we get to the darkest layer, we can start adding a little bit of shine, which we haven't done yet. This is taking a little bit longer. So dark,
That's
dark,
cool.
dark. Yeah, no, this part is really fun. I think a really well done like neck and shoulder area, especially on a woman, is very impactful. So it's good I definitely don't mind spending a lot of time on it because someone looks at like a nice set of like collarbones and like, wow, that is really good, you know. So I like spending more time on that. I think it's very difficult as well to get that to not add too much shadow, because then it looks like they have a lot of like a super muscular neck, which I guess some girls do, but this one doesn't. Right? And here we add the shine. And now we have a pretty nice looking set of like clavicles, neck. So at this point, we're going to start working on hair. Dark, 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 like Rum's serial killer heart. I'm sorry, I'm reading my Twitch chat. All right, so
do you use the same shading technique on the face as you do on the rest of the body?
Yeah, then it's very similar. Like I said, so basically what happens is I end up using 4 total layers for the face, maybe 5. So there's the base layer, which we said is just our default color, like our neutral color, not too light or too dark. I have a dark layer that sets down most of the features, like the nose and like the shadow around the eyes. I have a light layer which like accentuates the light on the cheekbones, the chin, like the nose, like the tip of the nose, stuff like that. And then I have 2 like one extremely dark and one extremely light layer, and those are for like the very end. Like for example, this part under the ear is the darkest it's gonna get. This left eye here that's under the hair is the darkest it's gonna get. So we want to save that. Yeah, we want to use the darkest area in only when we need it, and then the lightest layer, like I said, adds that little shine around the face. Okay, so we're gonna move on to hair now, and the thing about hair is it's very difficult because people's first impression is they just want to draw they want to just draw every single hair, which you don't really want to do. I think I don't think I've always feel like I did pretty well with hair because I have a good hair brush. I think having the right brush. So up to this point, we've done everything with just the default Photoshop brush, like just like a default round brush, like round soft brush, low opacity, right? And so for hair, it's a little bit different. I think if you want to do it, I think to get a good lifelike hair, it's important to have a good brush, and those are just everywhere online. You can download them from wherever. Just Google like, you know, Photoshop hairbrush or Inkscape hairbrush in your case. So that really helps out, I think. I think otherwise, because otherwise you're either gonna get hair that's kind of cartoony or like not terribly realistic, or you're gonna have to draw every single hair yourself, and nobody wants to do that. So I'm sorry, go on.
I do that for a majority of the pictures. But the program I use doesn't have brushes. They have a Bezier tool, and you have to I choose to individually click and select different hairstyles and different, like, just make sure I go with the flow of the hair itself, not looking like it's like all weird and wonky.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah, I think hair is very difficult to make it look natural otherwise. So here we're going over the outline of it, trying to make sure that the edges look nice and like fluffy and not like chopped up or very sharp. We want to make sure that the hair looks nice and conditioned and, you know, soft and touchable. So that's what we're doing here. And then I kind of add a little bit more to go under the neck, under the face here. Add a shadow there. So using the hairbrush that we talked about, the strategy is very much the same. Like here, like I said, we're using our sketch to figure out where the hair falls. Like where like in this case, she has like a braid in the back or something. So we're trying to make sure that we get the lines to line up so that the hair like flows from the front to the back, and then but also down, because not the whole thing is braided. So in this case, we were just following our sketch, taking a dark brush, putting this on a new layer, just drawing out where the dark is supposed to go.
I just put a picture of the example of the hair I did.
Right, and so that's pretty cool actually. Yeah, no, for that style that totally makes sense, but for a little bit more of a realistic style, we're gonna have to, you know, it's tough to do that without making it stand out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So here we take the darkest layer and we just kind of draw again, you just look at the reference. You look like, okay, the hair goes over, like the dark area is over here. The hair is flowing in this direction. From this picture you sent me, you already understand the basics of how hair works, so I don't really need to explain that part. That's good. I think a lot of people have a hard time with that. So a lot of it is just filling in the darkest areas, going darker, 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 like we talked about, until we're confident with the direction. Here we want to make sure that the braids really stand out. Otherwise, it kind of just looks like there's like lumpy hair that's like laying around in a weird order. So we're really going dark with the braids to make sure that they stand out. And so then we want to go, and then we're going to start going with light. Going too fast or too? This is going too fast or too slow? This is going normal speed. Okay. And then we just add the highlights, like where the light hits, where the braids stand out, the top of the braids, because the light is touching them. And then like I talked about, lighter, lighter, lighter. Just keep looking at the reference until it works, which is a very simple way of saying it, but that's exactly what it is. Just look at your picture and then look at your drawing, and then, you know, just close the gap between them eventually. And a lot of it is just practice, and a lot of it can't even be explained. So here we're going to just the lightest we can possibly go, and that really adds a nice a nice shininess to it. Like it's well conditioned. Like she used some fancy $70 shampoo or something. Yeah, you know. So that's what we're trying to do here. Just add the lightest possible that we can get away with without making it look unnatural.
So do you put the lighting on a different?
Yep. Everything here is a different layer. We have the base layer, we have our dark, we have our light, and then we have like the super light, which is like the shininess around like the crown of the head. So that's and you can do this any way you want. I know some people do their whole art on one layer, which I think is absolutely insane. As you get more experienced, you probably feel more confident about doing something like that, but I still use a lot of different layers just to make it look cleaner. And here we're just adding extra hairs, kind of just drawing them all around the place. So one thing that really makes the hair look a little bit natural, like a little bit more chaotic, because that's what real hair is. Like it's not all in one direction. There's like flyaways, there's strands that don't make a lot of sense. So here we just take a lighter brush. Basically we draw some hairs that don't really follow the lines don't really follow the rest of the hair, so they kind of go like maybe like they kind of curve out, they kind of like fly away a little bit, and that just makes it look more natural. So that's a big step that a lot of people I think neglect. Of course, none of that matters if you don't get the rest of it right. So that's like a very final step. And then we'll just do the same here for the layers that go under the head, go under the face.
Mm-hmm.
Just making sure we understand where the shadows go. So like the hair behind the head is going to be a lot darker and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory from there. If you did the top of the head, you can do this part very easily, right? It's just a continuation of the same.
That's cool.
Right. So that's pretty much it as far as face and like the top part. And so we can move on to like this part we can speed this part up, the clothes that we did after this, because the clothes are going to be different depending on whatever you draw, and if you could even draw them naked if you want. I don't judge. You know, so that part's not going to be as entirely useful, I think, to someone who's trying to learn something new. But let me speed this up a little bit. So here again, since this is and so one part that's really important about clothes is understanding what material you're working with. You can see the picture I sent you. It's pretty shiny, right? Like it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's like almost like that trash bag type. It's not quite trash bag, but it's a little bit more matte.
Trash bag-esque.
Trash bag-esque, yeah. And it's got that. It holds a shine. So we want to make sure. So what that means is we want to go a little bit darker than we normally would if we're working with like a cotton shirt or something, right? Because then cotton doesn't really capture that much. Doesn't really have that extreme shadow or light because it's not very shiny. Here in this case we want to go dark, so basically just set out all the lines, go really dark with it, because we don't have to be here's one thing that I think a lot of artists struggle with, is they're afraid to go really dark or really light with their colors. They're like, oh, that's so dark, it's gonna look insane if I put it on my picture. It's like, no, you should just do it, because if you don't, I mean, if it doesn't look good, just remove it. I think a lot of artists are really afraid to go with the extreme like lights and darks, but that's really important, especially if you're doing something with a dramatic lighting, because things will get very dark, and the lighting will shift. There will be a very large lighting range. So example here, I think a lot of people would be afraid to go this dark with the shading here, but it's really important because otherwise you don't get the right. It doesn't look as shiny. If you have a smaller light range, it'll look more matte, and we want it to look shiny here. So we're using a lot of dark colors, and it looks it's kind of harrowing at first, but as you go through it, it's pretty straightforward. Just follow the reference and go through it. Yeah, trash bag. It's the only way I can describe that kind of outfit. It just, like, every time I see one of these coats, and I have one myself, so I guess I can't really complain, but it basically looks like a trash bag to me.
So how dark do you want to get the shading contrast to the actual coat itself without the shading?
It really depends on what you're going with, and it's hard to, I can't really give you like a specific, like, this is how dark it needs to be, you know. So for example, here we I kind of pulled off, I just took whatever level was, whatever the base layer was, and I set it to multiply on a new layer. So basically what that does is it makes it a lot darker, but it still preserves any other shading I did on previous layers. So and then I went with another even darker layer. So it's kind of like, you kind of just have to eyeball it, and it's hard to say, and you can use your reference as a guide for sure. Just like pull the darkest color off your reference, like, okay, this is dark, we're going to use this, and pull the lightest color, like this is the lightest we're going to go, okay? And like,
all right.
That doesn't always work, but that's a good rule of thumb. Just like look at your reference. The darkest spot on your reference will be the darkest spot on your drawing, you know. So what I like to do sometimes is, like, for example, here I use a lighter color, but I use a lighter color here than what is the lightest color on my reference, because when you're coloring with like a low opacity brush, it's not gonna go the full value, right? So you need to make a couple more either do a lot more strokes, or if you're trying to get a gradual fade in like this, just start with a lighter color, and then using a gradual like gradients and like shading, it'll end up the color you want it to be, if that makes any sense. It's kind of a hard concept to explain. Okay, so yeah, we're basically just going through with it, and then
So how many layers is the jacket itself?
the jacket here, let me see. So we have, and you can see this on the screen here, it's very hard to read, but we have basically our layer with our so here's one thing that I think, again, I talked about layering and how this is important. This looks very, like, you can tell this looks pretty sharp. Like, you can, like, there's not a lot of blurriness going on. Like, you can clearly tell which arm is which, where the color ends and starts. And this jacket is 5 layers. Just the base, like, just the base color of this jacket. So we have the main body, which is this part right here in the middle. And on top of that main body, we have the left sleeve. And on top of the left sleeve layer, we have the right sleeve. And on top of both of those, we have this collar out here in front. So what that does is it very clearly separates the places that need to be clearly separated, right? So you don't want your arm to look like it's all like one giant blob, right? So this is all separated. And within each layer, what we've done is we have a line layer, which I sort of used, you can see it here. I just kind of traced out, like, based on my sketch, I just traced out where the folds are. Here, like, you can see, like, there's the seams here, and, like, the zipper down the middle. That's the lines layer. I have a dark layer. Let me see how far we are. I have a dark layer, just to get a basic shadow. Just to get the basic shadow. So that's like this. And it's not super dark. It's darker than the base level, right? But it's mostly just to get an idea of where stuff is. And then I go super dark with it here, which is another layer, which is just because it's shiny. It has a high contrast material, so we want to go really dark with it. That's what that layer is for. And then I have a light layer, which I just I go over it once with like a lighter color here, just to make sure that everything is, we get the light areas, and then you could make another layer for the next step, but I just did it all in one. I just took like basically white. It's almost white. You can see up here, it's very light. It's not close to white, but it's very bright. And then we just like take a small brush, kind of like very carefully get in the very shiny parts here. So like where the light is, where like the folds are on the clothes, that's where there's gonna be a lot of light, stuff like that. And like the part that's closest to the light source, which in this case would be like the shoulders, those are gonna have a lot of light, so we want to make sure we do that. Yeah, this this jacket was pretty fun actually. I think it ends up looking a lot better than, like, you don't feel like you're putting that much effort into it, and then at the end you're like, oh, it looks pretty good, just because.
Yeah, you could convince somebody to put 10 hours into it.
Right, exactly. This whole thing, beginning to finish, sketch to end, with another outfit, took like 9, I think, maybe at most. So that's like, it takes a significant amount of time. But yeah, no, it didn't take nearly as long as some of the other stuff I do. But yeah, it does take a long time. It's a major commitment to be able to do stuff to go after photorealism, I think. And so we do the same process here on the hood. Just go after the dark, 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 and then go light, 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 and then that's pretty much it. Like that's basically where we're at. And
that's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have about 10 minutes left for questions if you have any.
No, I'm just wondering, how is it? Wait, hold on. I have to form this question.
For sure.
What is it? The jacket itself. Are you going for like a symmetrical look in the folds or an unsymmetrical look?
What do you
personally, not like, and like the overall design of the jacket? Do you want one side? Were you going for like one side of the jacket be an exact copy or an off copy of the other side?
No, definitely not. We definitely don't want to do that because, first of all, you can see here she's not facing exact. She's not facing completely straight. Her right shoulder has a slight turn to it, so it's facing, well, it is almost completely straight, but it is like a little bit of a turn, like a rotation to it. So if you just fold one side over to the other side, it's not gonna look right because. Am I ready to? Yeah. Okay. It's not gonna look. It's gonna look very. Someone's gonna look at it and be like, yeah, those two sides are exactly the same. But also just because clothes, like, they don't lay nicely on you. Like, you go look in the mirror, you go face the mirror straight on, your clothes are not gonna be symmetrically folded. They're gonna be like face like swooping in one direction. It's gonna be like more folds on one side, one arm versus the other. It's very, yeah, no, I definitely don't think you'd want to just mirror something over, because especially when it comes to clothes, because people will notice, first of all, and second of all, it's not, clothes are very, like, the way clothes lay on a body is very hard to predict otherwise. I think it's very asymmetrical in nature.
All right.
Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, so in terms of the creases in the jacket itself, are you careful where you put the creases so it doesn't look like random lines on the jacket, or did you go to the reference itself?
Yeah, no, I did this based off of the reference. When you're doing the lines doing it based off of clothes, it can't, if it's random, it's very obvious, right? It has to follow the flow of your body, follow the flow of like where your limbs are and stuff like that, and where like your, where the folds, like just the way the clothes are shaped. It's very difficult to just do that straight up. Like, so it either comes with a lot of experience, or you can just like take a picture of yourself in the mirror or something and look at it from there. Use references, use Google. It's all very, very good, But that's a good question. I think it's it's one of those things that really comes with experience, just being able to see how clothes fit on a person, and it really depends on the material as well. Like, this jacket is super puffy. If it was like like the first reference I showed you was like a felt jacket, like a kind of a cotton, like furry jacket, and there's like nothing going on there. It just kind of like lays flat. So that's a little bit different. Anything else?
No, that was about it. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I hope I was helpful. And like I said, it's tough to fit it all into an hour. So if you have any other questions, you can always ask me. Maybe we can set up another one of these or something like that.
All right, sweet, man. Thank you.
Yep. It was nice meeting you. I'll see you around.
You too.